Hello, sweet honeybees, and welcome to the Electric Honey Pot, where energy is the nectar of life. My name is Autumn, and this whole project's about the human experience. The good, the bad, the ugly, and all of the magic that happens in between. Last week, I had someone that left a comment on my video talking about how generational trauma was ultimately what killed my mom. And they asked me if I could speak a little more about family trauma because my family sounds like their family. First of all, I want to say I am so sorry if my family sounds like your family, because I have a very dysfunctional family and it has caused me a lot of mental health issues throughout my entire life and a lot of pain, even as I have gone no contact with most of my family. It has still caused a lot of pain in my life. But I just wanted to take the time to talk about it as was requested, because I have been working on a writing project where I've been detailing some of the dynamics within my family and my experiences, and now's a good time while it is all fresh on my mind. I had my tea, did my typing, and now I'm in the car, ready to go. Let's talk about it. Part of what allowed the neglect, the abuse, and the narcissism to take place in my family was the fact that my family followed a biblical family structure, which is a patriarchy. Christ is on the top. The husband and father is below Christ as the head of the household. He is supposed to lead, protect, and provide for the family. And then the wife and mother comes below the husband. She is meant to submit to her husband and support her husband by taking care of the household and raising the children and making sure everybody knows who's in charge of the house. At the very bottom of the totem pole, you have the children in the family who are meant to love and obey their parents. As the elders in my family and members of the church congregation that I attended when I was younger, they would always tell you to respect your elders, but no one ever questioned whether or not the elders in the family were healthy or causing harm to other members of the family. I don't really know too much about my grandparents' upbringing. I only met my great-grandparents on my mom's side a couple of times. I wasn't really around them enough, and I didn't really hear enough stories to know what all that was like. So I really don't know how far back everything goes. But I spent a lot of time around my grandfather as a child because my mom's parents, my maternal grandparents, lived right down the street from my childhood home, my mom's house. And I attended a Christian academy for the first couple of years I was in school, 2 years of preschool and then kindergarten. And my Nana worked at the school too, so she would take me home most days while my mom was still at work. It was really hard for me to escape the influence of my family because someone was all around during those early developmental years. But I can remember from times at my grandparents' house that, you know, my Nana was a very soft-spoken, well-mannered woman. She was very slow to anger or to raise her voice. And she usually didn't have to do either of those things to get the children to obey, because she had certain tones of voice that she would use or facial expressions that she would use. And if that wasn't enough to get us to obey her, she would use threats like, should I call your grandfather, or should I get your grandfather from outside while he was working so he can get his leather belt? Does he need to know about this situation? And my grandfather was the complete opposite of my grandmother. He had a very short fuse, and he was quick to anger, a hot temper. He yelled when he was angry. Like if he was angry, everybody around him knew it. Everybody in the family knew when he was unhappy, and no one dared question his emotions, his thoughts, his opinions. Everybody just enabled this behavior because he was the patriarch of the family. And hearing the threat of the belt was usually more than enough for the children to know that they need to listen. It was a way to coerce control out of us while making us believe that we were making the decision ourselves, when really we were being manipulated through fear because we didn't want to be physically harmed. I only got spanked a couple of times as a really young child, and that was more than enough for me. I learned from a very early age that I need to be on my best behavior, do as I'm told, or if I'm not doing as I'm told. As I got older, I learned that I need to keep secrets from adults. Which I even kept secrets from adults as a younger child too, as a result of the upbringing. My papa also never, he never even tried to sugarcoat the possibility of receiving a whooping. He didn't try to make it sound sweet the way that my grandmother did with her lowered tone of voice and soft demeanor. My grandfather could be a frightening person at times, but this is what makes it so difficult, is the fact that it wasn't always like that. Family holidays especially were a completely different experience within my family. It was the one time when things felt normal and like everybody loved each other, because everybody put on their happy faces and they were on their best behavior. And as an adult now, I can see that it was performative for my grandfather, because as an adult, I recognize that my grandfather was a narcissist, and everybody was on their best behavior to show him how great of a job he did in raising his family. Everybody was pretending like the abuse that happened within the family was completely normal. Everybody enabled what happened. And going back to, respect your elders, it's frowned upon to talk about your family. You're not supposed to speak ill about your family because they love you. They want what's best for you. They're concerned about you. There's just a lot of gaslighting that went on. When my mom got divorced from my dad, it was the very first divorce that ever took place within that side of the family. She was the first woman to have a failed marriage. And I'm honestly not too sure which way it is, because the story is different depending on what family member is talking about it. But from what I have heard, my grandfather was either asked to step down from a position of authority within the church, or he was told to step down, forced to step down because of my mom's divorce. Because up until that point, our family had seemed like the ideal Christian family. My grandfather was seen as a successful patriarch. His family, everybody in the family was following the biblical family structure, and we were all attending church and praising God. And my grandfather was a successful entrepreneur with a well-known name around town, yet he still, had a cattle farm, and lived relatively humbly other than his flashy cars and cane and watch and his generous contributions to the church. So my grandfather was really admired, but after my mom's divorce, all of that changed. My mom had tainted the family. And again, I don't really know the full details of that story because my parents divorced when I was only about 4 years old. And my memories from that time are kind of spotty. I only have a couple of memories here and there. But what I do know is that my mom was heavily shamed, blamed, and guilted for the divorce. And the damage that it did to my grandfather's reputation within the church. His public image had been tarnished by her disrespecting the Bible and committing a sin by getting divorced. And when it comes to the role of women within Christianity, women are taught that happiness and worth as a woman is found in praising God through marrying a godly man and having a lot of children. And that it's all found in, marriage and motherhood. Because of this, my mom had a difficult time being single. She had 2 girls, my sister and myself, and she couldn't seem to be happy on her own. And because of this, there were abusive boyfriends. My mom had several different boyfriends before she met my stepdad, and I met most of them. No matter how long she was dating, I still met them. And it was very confusing for me as a child having this revolving door of strange men around. There was even one boyfriend that would sometimes stay the night, and he would get extremely angry and yell at my mom. He made me very uncomfortable. There was one night I was watching a movie in the living room down the hall, and the yelling started, and then it just turned into thumps, and I heard breaking glass, and my sister heard the escalation, and she came downstairs, and she took me outside, and we walked over to the neighbor's house until the fighting stopped. My sister is 8 years older than me, and she's always had, a better understanding of things going on because of her age. So even as a preteen, my sister was kind of stepping in, trying to be my savior. And it was like that as a teenager too, as I had a very tumultuous relationship with my mom. My sister would pick me up and get me out of the house a lot. I would go eat dinner with her all the time. In fact, the big event which destroyed my relationship with my mom was when I was 12 years old. I had my very first psychiatric hospitalization, and it happened because I didn't want to go over to my dad's house. My dad was going through a divorce, and he was angry, and we didn't get along very well in Hatton for a couple of years because I was starting to kind of explore my personality, and I was into alternative fashion and alternative music, and he was not a fan of that. He thought that that's what was causing all of my behavioral problems, when my behavioral problems were being caused because of the neglect and the abuse that I was experiencing within my family, on top of online grooming at the age of 11. So I didn't feel comfortable going over to my dad's house. And my dad, I asked my mom if I could stay at my friend's house that was down the road from her house. That way I could work on a science project that was due the next day anyway. And if she could trade nights with my dad. And she told me she could. I called my dad and I told him the situation, that my mom would even trade nights with him. And he got angry and he was like, no, tonight is my night. I'm coming to pick you up. Because going back and forth between households, I felt like a possession between my two parents. I felt like a tool to use to hurt the other parent, as they were always talking bad about each other in front of me, always putting each other down and using me as ammunition against the other parent. I didn't quite feel like a person or like I was genuinely loved. I felt like a commodity. But anyway, my dad came over to my friend's house anyway, and we ended up in her grandparents' laundry room yelling at each other. And my dad had a tendency of grabbing me. Like, my dad never hit me or anything like that, but my dad had a tendency to like grab my wrists and my hands and try to get me to do things. And he grabbed me to try to get me out of the laundry room to take me to his house, and I bit him. And I ran out of the room, started running down the road in the middle of a thunderstorm, and my dad called my mom. My mom suddenly pulls up beside me in a van with our next door neighbor, who happens to be the wife of a state trooper. And they try to get me in the van, and I tell them, no, I don't feel comfortable going home with my mom. I don't feel comfortable going home with my dad. I want to go to my sister's house. I'm running to my sister's house, which is like 20 minutes away by car. And my mom eventually tells me that she will take me to my sister's house if I just get in the van to get out of the rain. I get in the van and we're going down the bypass. We pass my sister's exit. I started to panic and I asked my mom where we're going. And my mom burst into tears and starts telling me how sorry she is for what she's doing. And I start freaking out. And that's when the state trooper's wife tells me that we're going to the hospital because I need help. We get to the hospital. I spend the entire night cuffed to a hospital bed with my family coming in and out, treating me like I'm sick, like I'm a problem. The doctor keeps asking me if I want to go home with my mom or my dad. I'm very adamant that I want to go home with my sister. The next morning, they tell me that going home with my sister is not an option because she's not my legal guardian. And since I feel uncomfortable going home with either parent, I am going to a psychiatric hospital. And so I got escorted out of the hospital in handcuffs and then escorted to the psychiatric hospital an hour north, in handcuffs in a police car at 12 years old because I didn't feel safe going with my parents and just wanted to be with my sister. And then that hospital stay was an extremely traumatic stay too. That's another story though. But that experience completely demolished any trust that I had with my mom. It was such a deep betrayal. That's when I started to spiral. I started smoking at 12 years old after I got out. I would steal cigarettes from my mom and my stepdad as I got older, my mom even started buying me cigarettes. Like a year or two later, my mom was actually buying me cigarettes, and she never even confronted me about taking her cigarettes or anything like that. In fact, the only time I can remember ever getting in trouble for smoking cigarettes was when I was smoking them in the house because she could smell them, which my stepdad later started smoking in the house. I started drinking at the age of 13. My stepdad was also an amputee. Like, he had a work-related injury that killed his foot and his leg and had to have it amputated. So there was basically a whole pharmacy in our house, and I would even abuse my stepdad's prescription medications, anything to escape my reality, because I was so unhappy with my reality. My mom was very emotionally unavailable. My dad was too. I couldn't really talk to my dad about my emotions. But it's really my mom's side of the family and my experiences at my mom's house which did the most damage to me, because that's where I spent most of my time, and that's where the biggest dysfunctions were. My mom wasn't really present in my life. You know, she was around, but she wasn't around, you know. She would go to my softball games and watch me play. But if we were at the house, she didn't really interact with me other than, you know, we'd watch movies together. So there's no conversation. We're just glued to a screen. Or she would watch her TV shows and play Candyland with me sometimes, or chess or checkers. But again, there was no interaction other than just playing the game and her watching TV. When Charmed or Days of Our Lives came on, she would tell me to be quiet because our show is coming on, or she would send me to the next room. You know, my mom was also looking to escape her reality, just like I was, but she had other means of escaping her reality. As I got older, the yelling in the house just got worse. You know, when I was a kid, my stepsister moved out of the house as soon as she turned 18 because she was tired of having arguments with my mom. She couldn't stand being around my mom. My sister moved out pretty quickly too, because of arguments with my mom. And as a teenager, my sister argued with my mom all the time. And then when I became a teenager, I argued with my mom all the time. I completely resented her for not being there for me and for not protecting me. And we would get into screaming matches. And then once I had my attempt at ending my life at 15, when I got out and I spiraled even further because it was a confirmation that my family didn't want me. You know, my mom didn't want me to stay at home alone anymore. I had been staying home alone a lot. My mom was a craft vendor, so I spent a lot of time completely by myself while my mom and my stepdad were out of town. But once I got out of that place, my mom would either take me to craft shows with her, or my stepdad would stay at the house, which he was unconscious on his pain medication, so it was still like I was alone. And some of these places that my mom took me, like we went to bike rallies at Beach Bend, and my mom would give me alcohol, and she would watch, like, older men would come up to me asking for me to flash them for beads, and my mom would tell me that it's okay to do it. And I was like 15 at this time. 15, and then right after I turned 16, we went to another one. And a lot of really bad things happened at those bike rallies. Like, my mom would let me drink to the point of getting drunk and then go wander around the campgrounds, and I got taken advantage of by a lot of older men. And my mom didn't protect me. She wasn't there for me. And as my abuse of my stepdad's medications got even worse throughout this entire experience, there was a social worker involved too. But the social worker didn't know that any of this was going on because, we were both really good at hiding certain things. The one thing that I couldn't hide were my explosive emotions. But I learned to hide other things because in my family, we're just taught to hide everything. You don't talk about certain things. And my mom even told me once that I'm the reason why she can't be happy with her life, when ever since I was a young child, she was part of the reason why I couldn't be happy with my life. And I ended up getting kicked out at the age of 16. Like, my stepdad left at 16. We lost our family home, and I'm part of the reason why we lost our family home, because I resented my mom so much. I was stealing money from her purse. I didn't really grasp the concept. I knew that there was like bills for the house and all that. I didn't know any of the prices. I didn't know our financial situation. I really did not understand the implications of what I was doing. But I am part of the reason why we lost our childhood home. I was stealing money from my mom's purse when I was 15 and 16. And, my stepdad said that he was leaving when my mom told me that we're losing the house. And he left, and that's when my mom's new boyfriend moved in. He was an old schoolmate, and she had started spending time with him while I was in that residential facility. And he was also an angry man. The whole family liked him because he put on this mask when he was around the family or when they were around friends. But when he was at home behind closed doors, he would yell at me. He would yell at my mom. He would cuss at me. And then I got kicked out because I was learning how to drive, and I parked his truck wrong, and I asked him to repark it for me so I didn't hit the vehicle next to us. And he cussed me out for that, left me somewhere. My sister took me home, and then I was told to leave. Yeah, so my family's always been really messed up. There's so much more, but that's a good general idea of what my home life and my upbringing was like. As I'm on my healing journey and I'm processing, I'm uncovering new things all the time, healing and discovering yourself and reflecting on how your upbringing shaped you as a person. It is a journey. It doesn't just happen overnight. I have these ups and downs as I have these revelations about my childhood and myself. And again, it wasn't all bad. There was a lot of good too. And I still loved my mom and my grandparents very, very much. Just the hot and the cold has such an impact on your psyche. It's so confusing, and it really messes with you as a person. I realized that my mom was also a traumatized person that did not know how to handle her trauma, and she couldn't even recognize that she had trauma. So I can have empathy for her. I can have empathy for my aunt and my uncle because they also have mental problems. I mean, my uncle is a carbon copy of my grandfather, and it's because of their upbringing. I can recognize that. It does not excuse the behavior, and, I feel there should still be accountability for the behavior, but I can have some kind of empathy and compassion because I understand that they have also suffered and gone through trauma, but they are unable to recognize it or to break the cycle. It has completely eaten away at their lives. And, I'm at a point now, I'm in a low point right now, but I have grown so much from where I was because I am learning to recognize it. I'm learning to process it, and healing and processing is a very, very messy thing to do. It is not clean, pretty, and nice, no matter what anyone wants to tell you or try to sugarcoat the healing process, because it is some dirty, hard, dark work. But I'm very grateful that I can recognize it, even if it has been hard, and I'm the black sheep and the scapegoat of the family. Being able to recognize it is the very first step to breaking those chains and learning how to heal it. And just because you struggle sometimes does not mean you are always going to struggle. There's always going to be good days and there's going to be bad days. Some days are a lot easier than others. But just know that it wasn't your fault. It wasn't because of you. It was because of them. You're lovable and you are worthy. And your family couldn't love you because they couldn't properly love themselves. And that's because they didn't receive the love that they needed either. Heal yourself by learning how to love yourself and by choosing yourself. I really hope by me sharing and opening up, it helps you feel less alone, because none of us are alone in our experiences, and it sucks knowing that other people go through these things. But at the end of the day, we can choose to be burned alive, or we can choose to be forged in the fire. And some of the greatest people, the people that have had the greatest impact in this world, have been people that have come from hardship and adversity. And your past does not define your future. Your dark past can be the catalyst to an even brighter future. Do not give up. You can get through this. I believe in you. Believe in yourself. That's what I've got. Thank you so much for listening. And I hope you have a absolutely wonderful day, night, week, month, year, and life. Stay curious. I love you so much.